Tonight, surprise for speeders. Police seize 14 vehicles in Fort St. John. Drinking habits. Fort Nelson leads the way in Northeast BC. An anniversary. 5 years ago today, COVID was declared a global pandemic. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with drivers in the Peace region gearing up for another frosty week ahead, prompting extra caution on our roads. The BC Highway Patrol now urging motorists to slow down after a whopping 14 vehicles were impounded for speeding in Fort St. John. Now, of the 14, 3 were going 60 kilometers over the posted speed limit. 2 of the drivers were novices, another was on a learner's permit. They learned the hard way, being slapped with a maximum fine of $483, plus their vehicle was impounded. And the 2 end drivers, they were ticketed for $369 for speeding, an additional $109 for not displaying their stickers. 2 other motorists were pulled over for speeding and impaired driving, while another had no insurance and was fined $1,081. All drivers will also be responsible for the cost of towing, a 7-day impound, and of course will receive ICBC demerit points. Corporal Michael McLaughlin warns that you never know when a crackdown on speeding will occur, but he assures drivers privileges will be lost if they are caught. Speeding, distracted, and impaired driving are the top 3 causes of fatal collisions across British Columbia. Well, new research shows British Columbians are drinking less, with alcohol sales hitting a 20-year low. The researchers out of the University of Victoria found that alcohol sales have reached the lowest point since they began tracking back in 2001. Last year, British Columbians over the age of 15 bought an equivalent of 469 standard drinks per person. Well, that's a 9% decrease from the previous year, which researchers say is the largest single-year drop since data collection began. However, totals in Northeast BC are much higher than that of the provincial average. Sales were also down across the region, except in Fort Nelson, who averaged 791 standard drinks per person throughout the year. Peace River South bought the equivalent of 627 drinks, while Peace River North was slightly lower at 613. The Northern Health region reported the second highest level of per capita alcohol sales, and April saw the highest sales of all. Experts point to increased cost of just about everything as a reason why some people may be cutting back on alcohol. Well, it may be hard to believe, but it's been 5 years since COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. And the province is marking the day by honoring everyone whose lives were turned upside down as a result. The statement from Premier David Eby says more than 6,600 people in British Columbia and more than 58,000 Canadians overall died from the virus. He says, today we remember them as well as others who got sick or continue to suffer from the lasting effects of long COVID. Eby also thanked the healthcare professionals who worked tirelessly to keep people safe. The BC Ministry of Health stopped reporting numbers back in April of 2023. Up to that point, Northern Health had reported 428 deaths and nearly 32,000 cases of COVID across the health authority. Nearly 2,700 people in Northern BC were also hospitalized because of the virus. The threat of tariffs also causing housing market in BC to take a hit. The BC Real Estate Association reported just shy of 5,000 homes sold in February. Well, that's down nearly 10% from February of 2024. The association says after several months of growing momentum, market activity was hampered by the uncertainty surrounding tariffs last month. In February, the average residential price in British Columbia was just below $965,000. Well, it's been another tumultuous day in the trade war between Canada and the United States after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to double tariffs on steel and aluminum. Ontario backed down on its surcharge on electricity to the United States, and late today, the White House also backing away from Trump's tariff escalation. CTV's Judy Trin explains.
After Ontario's decision to roll out an electricity surcharge against the United States, President Donald Trump publicized his next move on social media. He would double tariffs on steel and aluminum to 50% and declare a national emergency on electricity to allow the U.S. to act quickly against the abusive threat from Canada.
The president saw the Premier, Doug Ford, make an egregious and insulting comment threatening to shut down electricity for the American people.
By no means are we just going to roll over, because we don't roll over to anyone. What we are going to do is have a constructive conversation.
After speaking with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, Premier Doug Ford decided to pause the electricity surcharge 24 hours after implementing it.
Secretary Lutnick has sent out an olive branch to us to come down and immediately meet with him, meet with the whole trade administration, and discuss the future.
Canada's Prime Minister-designate is vowing to stand firm on $30 billion worth of counter tariffs already in place. Mark Carney said they will stay there until Americans show us respect and make reliable commitments on free and fair trade, while Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre urged Canada to also put 50% duties on American steel and aluminum. Quebec is Canada's biggest exporter of aluminum. The leader of the bloc says the escalation exposes Trump's weakness.
It seems to me to be the proof of his failure. If he believed that 25% were hard enough on us to have us bend the knee, he would be satisfied with that.
Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc and Premier Doug Ford will travel to Washington on Thursday to meet with White House officials. President Trump says he won't impose 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum, but the 25% tariffs still stand. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
And all of Donald Trump's back and forth on tariffs is having a major effect on stock markets. It's been another challenging day for traders as losses continue to mount. The continued volatility coming as Trump announced additional tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum coming into the U.S. Trump's whiplash policy causing concerns about a recession in the United States now. On Monday, the S&P 500 recorded its most significant one-day drop since December the 18th. A staggering $4 trillion has been wiped out since its recent peak in mid-February. Today, the S&P finished up slightly. And Donald Trump is also threatening to shut down Canada's auto sector. So, exactly how would that work in an industry so intertwined with the United States?
I'm outside the GM plant in Oshawa, where workers have been on a real roller coaster ride with on-again, off-again tariffs. And now Trump's saying that unless Canada does what he wants tariff-wise, he'll substantially increase auto tariffs April 2nd and essentially shut down automaking in Canada permanently. Of course, workers are hoping he's again bluffing. It's clear he wants to move more automaking to the U.S., but this latest threat is much more extreme. But is it even possible? Those who follow the sector say it would require tens of billions of dollars of investment by the automakers in the U.S. and take many, many years, making companies like Ford and GM much less competitive. And in the short term, there would be plant shutdowns in Canada and the U.S. because the auto industry is so integrated. Also, if automakers pulled out, they'd face another problem.
Obviously, there would be backlash from consumers. Is anybody really going to go buy a GM or a Ford or a Chrysler after, they abandon Canada in what you could consider our moment of need?
As for the workers at this GM plant, they're feeling a lot of anxiety about Trump's latest comments.
Most of our members, like I say, are anxious, they're upset, they're mad, they're angry, they're scared.
They've been through a lot here, plant closures, a GM bankruptcy, and they think they will weather this, but they are worried about how increasingly angry Trump seems to be getting on his social media platforms.
Our country's oldest company, Hudson's Bay, could be seeing its final days.
Physical retail's not dead. This particular format is archaic, and you're seeing it die.
Hudson's Bay has filed for creditor protection to avoid bankruptcy. The company is blaming industry-wide pressure for its dire financial situation. Experts predict half of the chain's 80 stores could be closed, and if that happens, it would affect thousands of jobs. Customers are also being encouraged to quickly use up any gift cards. The man who will have to take on the tariff war for Canada continues taking the steps in order to be sworn in as Prime Minister. When the transfer of power will happen isn't clear. All the while, the Liberals are riding a wave of popularity, according to the latest opinion poll. CTV's Michael Couture reports.
The Prime Minister-designate is spending part of his second day as Liberal leader meeting with the heads of Canada's national security agencies. It is part of the process as he prepares to take over this government. Carney will also be in Toronto tomorrow to meet with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. The premier has been one of the leaders in the fight against U.S. tariffs, so it only makes sense for that to be high on his list of priorities. All the while, Carney is getting busy on making his cabinet. It's widely expected he'll keep ministers who are managing Canada-U.S. relations in those roles, but the rest really remains up in the air. There are also talks around bringing former premiers Christy Clark and Jean Charest into the fold in some capacity. Now, all of this while there is also election speculation here in Ottawa. It's being fueled by new polling numbers from Nanos Research. They show the Liberals are now just 1 point behind the Conservatives, with nearly 35% of respondents saying they'd vote for the Liberals. The NDP has fallen off and sit just under 15% right now. Now, it's remarkable considering a month ago the Conservatives had a nearly 20-point lead on the Liberals. Now, it's important to note that these numbers are based on polling that ended 2 days before Carney took the Liberal leadership in a landslide. So any kind of bump that Carney will be getting from that victory isn't in these numbers. Mike Lecouteur, CTV News, Ottawa.
And in his last days as Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau is pushing to reform the RCMP. A new government report says it's time to modernize the police service to focus on the most serious forms of crime. It says the government's vision should be to establish the RCMP as a, quote, world-class, intelligence-led federal policing organization, unquote. The report recommends working with territorial leaders and Indigenous partners to define a new policing model. The RCMP commissioner agrees that significant change is needed, but says funding has not been on par with what's needed to tackle these big issues. The U.S. is changing the rules for Canadian snowbirds. Canadians planning to be in the United States for more than 30 days must now register with the U.S. government, and failure to do so could result in criminal charges. Immigration lawyers say the executive order from Donald Trump will require Canadians to carry proof of registration on them at all times. The U.S. government says it's to curb illegal immigration.
What's happening right now is that the Trump administration is dusting off an old piece of legislation dating back from 1940, from the Second World War.
The new rules apply to travelers driving into the United States, but not those flying in. A possible step towards peace. Ukraine saying it is ready to enact an immediate 30-day ceasefire with Russia. The news comes after talks with the U.S. in Saudi Arabia.
We'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court.
According to a joint statement, the United States will immediately lift the pause on intelligence sharing and resume security assistance to Ukraine. The U.S. and Ukraine also agreed to complete a rare minerals deal as soon as possible.
Peace.
Before that potential breakthrough towards peace was agreed to, Ukraine struck Moscow overnight. The Russians are calling it the largest ever drone attack on the country's capital. Well, this video captures what appears to be the drone attack on Moscow. At least 2 people have been killed, 18 others injured. All right, please do stay tuned. I'll be right back with weather, but as we head to break, a look at today's closing market numbers.